Saheli, and she brings more than 15 years of global nonprofit management, uh, and has worked on a range of gender issues, microfinance, domestic violence, gender research, leadership development. She has a very long list of things that she has accomplished. She has worked with and led organizations like I will give you the acronyms because that's what I have. UNDP, UNIFEM, the Ford Foundation, we know that one, and the Center for Creative Leadership. And so she brings an enormous amount of expertise and perspective to this job as a co-director. And she shares that job with Rita Shah. And Rita has been with Saheli for about 24 years. And what she wants everybody to know is how proud she is of what Saheli does. And that the survivors know that they can come there. They know that there will be somebody there for them, and that it's a resource that they can always depend on. Rita has also done work with, she has a master's degree in social work and a leadership and management. So I'm sorry, master's degree in social work, leadership and management from Simmons. And she's president for Breakfast Rotary Club in Burlington for this 2021. And past president of the India Association of Greater Boston and a vice president of Indian American Forum on Political Education. She's done, we're talking to two incredibly accomplished women today. We have the honor of having them here. And I think you will leave with a lot more information about what they do and about the issue with the Asian population, that the South Asian particularly population, than you had before, and probably an enormous appreciation for what they do and what the particular needs are. So I will hand it to Rita and to Divya.
Thank you, Sue, so much for your kind words. I'm so happy to be here with Rita to share a little bit about our culture, about our work with you all. Thank you so much for inviting us. It is completely an honor and pleasure to be with you all today. Rita, do you want to say just a few words before I share the presentation?
I just want to say hello to everybody and thank you for having us. Divya, you can go ahead and share the presentation and we'll talk as we go along. Yeah.
Thank you, Rita. So I'll quickly share a presentation and briefly talk about South Asian culture, about our work, some of the cultural norms that that are prevalent in our community, demographics, and fun facts like those. So Saheli was started in 1996, and Rita is one of our original members right here today, because there was need felt in the immigrant community. There was domestic violence that was happening, and the community had very few resources that they could access. 24 years ago, it was not as much talked about as it is today. So Saheli actually had to couch the language of domestic violence in using words like health and, safety, even, 24 years ago, to get women to come and talk about these issues and for the community to talk about these issues. And since then, Saheli has persisted. It was largely volunteer-led for much of its existence, and it had a bunch of dedicated volunteers that allowed the organization to really do the work in the community for so long and with so much dedication. Making sure that our vision and mission is fulfilled. Our mission, Saheli's mission, is to empower South Asian women and families to lead safe and healthy lives, and that's what it has been doing for the past 24 years. So South Asia, before we talk about our work, about our culture, for many of you, who know, South Asia is countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and Maldives. It is a really diverse region of the world with multiple religions, and birthplace of many religions. It is, there's this plethora of languages in the region. India itself has 22 official languages. In fact, our Indian states are organized based on the primary language that they speak. So each state in India has its own official language, which is different from the national official language. There's the largest population of Hindus and Muslims in the part of the world. Sikhism, Jainism, these are the religions that were born in the region, highest population of people in the region. In Massachusetts alone, there are about 200,000 South Asians that are in the state, and the population is growing, of course. So our survivors come, primarily from South Asia. We're a culturally specific organization, helping survivors from South Asia. But we also are seeing survivors that are coming from Middle East and from Northern Africa. They're coming from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from Morocco, from Sudan. And the reason they are coming to Saheli is because of many shared, cultural practices and norms and beliefs, and they feel more comfortable talking about those to Saheli advocates because of the ability for the Saheli advocates to understand their culture and their experiences and where they're coming from. And that brings us to the culture. We talk about that a lot, and we understand it, and we see it. I really love this imagery of the iceberg, cultural iceberg, which many of you may have seen, the surface culture and the deep culture. And, we really enjoy the surface culture, different foods, language, festivals, literature that enrich a community. But there are the deep culture, the beliefs, customs, communication styles, behaviors, practices and institutions that constitute, a community, but are difficult to understand or for people from the outside. What are their attitudes towards work or towards raising a family, decision making, concept of time, of friendship, of hospitality, of families. Those are the nuances, the deep culture that it takes a long time to understand. Even for us, when we come from, even coming from the culture, speaking the language, we cannot say we understand someone from southern part of India if I'm from the northern part of India, or from Nepal or from Bhutan, completely. Right, because of the belief systems and the nuances of the deep culture, and so I always talk about cultural humility in our work at Saheli. When we talk to people outside, because I feel that this is the most powerful thing we can do to ourselves and to others, is to practice cultural humility, because cultural humility, as opposed to just culture competence, involves a practice of self-introspection. We are culturally competent domestic violence advocates because we come from the culture, we understand the culture, we speak the language, but we still need to practice cultural humility because each person is different. Their belief system, how they were raised in the family, from which part of the region they're coming from, what is the socioeconomic status, which caste they are from India, which religion they practice. All of those interact to make a person unique, and the experience is unique. So we need to engage as culture community advocates, as an organization, with at an individual level, with each individual. We need to understand them as a unique individual with their own behaviors. We need to understand our own biases, and we need to understand, how do I see myself? Because none of us are free from prejudices or stereotypes, and So the process of self-introspection and the commitment to work with another person and see that person as a unique individual will allow us to develop that relationship, that commitment, and that enables true understanding of another person, regardless of which culture they come from, regardless of how different they are from you, or regardless of how similar they are to you. It enables that kind of understanding. And the practice of cultural humility is so important in today's world, to really understand that, foster that understanding and that communication with individuals. I saw this TED talk by the author Chimananda Ngozi Adichie on unpacking stereotypes. Be careful of the single story. Many of you may have seen that. If you haven't, I would highly recommend that you do. It's on YouTube. It's a TEDx talk. And she speaks so powerfully her speech is so powerful about the single story. And sometimes, and in all openness, and when we talk about Saheli as a culturally specific organization, when we talk about the South Asian culture, when we talk about South Asian people or Arab people, many times we risk repeating the same story too, right? We are talking about a culture, the people as a monolith, single story. This is who the survivors are from South Asia. This is who the people are from South Asia. But there is definitely, more to that than the single story. So this is, being mindful for ourselves is a constant reminder to ourselves too, that we are telling a very complex story of complex human beings who come from different culture and, practice things differently. So before I go on, any questions, any comments from anyone? It's hard to see hands on the side, but please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask if you have any question or comments you would like to. Nalini, I see you raised, you had a question. Please go ahead.
Would you post that single story heading on your chat so that we can go back to it once this conversation is done? The Chinmananda.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so moving on, I thought that we would share some of the cultural beliefs and practices, of South Asians and, of Arab people. There are many shared, cultural similarities. The main, and this is something you may be aware of, the South Asian culture is, holds collectivistic views. It emphasizes family versus individual goals. And that actually stems from family relationships that are based on mutual obligations. So the family unit is based on obligation of family members towards each other. And so that includes, the obligations of the elder son or the elder daughter, and the obligations of a daughter-in-law, or the obligations of the father towards the children, of the mother towards the family, or even of, uncles and aunts. So the whole unit is based on obligations that sustain the family unit as a whole. And this is where when people, the first generation immigrants, when they come to the US and they raise their children in the US, the children who are US born, many times, that leads to the family conflict, because the family in the US, may be more nuclear or isolated, or may not have extended, benefit of extended family. Becomes a disconnect between the expectations of the first generation parents and what the expectations of their children are, in terms of children seeking individualistic goals, individual happiness, as opposed to putting family first. We see that with our survivors, where it is very hard for a survivor domestic violence from the South Asian culture, even when they come forward, that guilt and shame of not adhering, to the family goals and pursuing their own individualistic goal, stays with them. And then it makes it hard for them, to access resources or to even come out and seek help. There is the burden of duty on women. South Asian culture, Arab culture is, it's highly patriarchal. How patriarchal patriarchy is practiced is different in different parts of that region. There are very highly patriarchal societies in the northwest of India, as you know, there are in southern India. Southern India, it is. We see communities and societies that are more matriarchal, in fact, than patriarchal. So there is that diversity of practices in Southern Asia. But regardless, there is the burden of duty that is placed on women. A woman's role is marriage and family and children, and the duty is imposed on her. There is, because of the patriarchal nature of the society, there is a son preference. And this is also based, going back to family obligations. There are many obligations that a son performs. For example, in Hindu culture, there are many rites through your lifetime, religious rites that have to be performed by the son in the family. And not having a son jeopardizes that rights and your ultimate your ultimate goal of achieving oneness with God or whatever. So throughout your lifetime, there's certain traditions and practices that involve involvement of the son. And so there's a son preference in South Asian society, not just limited to South Asia. It is very much prevalent in East Asia as well. We see that in China, in Korea, in Taiwan. There is this heavy preference for having a son in the family, and families go to great lengths to actually ensure that they have son in the family. And in India, there's a pressure to have multiple children if if they have not had a son and have only had daughters. So we once we see that in the society there's son preference, it automatically kind of puts the woman in a second place, and she becomes peripheral in terms of her importance and her existence to the family and to the society. Sons and men and fathers are seen as providers and protectors of the family because of the male preference for families that don't have, if you lose if you lose your father figure, or if you don't have a husband, there are other male members in the family that will take that authority and be a provider for you, or help you make decisions. And this is what with many of Saheli survivors who come to seek Saheli services, they bring with them their kind of family family roles, where an uncle or from a distant uncle or a first cousin or an older brother takes that authority of taking care of this family. Marriages are, marriage is considered more a social union between two families, as opposed to considering a marriage between a man and a woman. It is a relationship for a lifetime between two families. And then the woman, you are, as a woman, as a girl, you are the repository of family's honor. So before marriage, you have to protect an honor of your mother and father's family, and then once you get married, you still have to maintain that honor for in-laws family. This is, again, it is very, very how it is practiced is very, very diverse. It is we see it, we hear of honor killings, and those are the extreme imposing of honor on a girl child, on a woman. So in some parts of the region, in some countries, slight variation of or slight and practice of disobeying the family or going against the rules can lead to a violation of honor and can lead to a harsh judgment. Whereas in many other parts of the region, we see a much more, much more lax or much more attitude towards dishonor. So the point I'm trying to make is that, when we hear about honor killings and the imagery, the idea we form is that, oh my God, that part of the world, this is what happens to every woman, but it's not like that. Like I said, it's about how, culture is expressed and practiced in different parts of the world in family, depending on, where they are born, what language they speak, and how much money they earn, and so much more. One common theme though in South Asia is divorce is very much stigmatized, and it brings shame to the family. Women are in fact willing to tolerate any kind of abuse rather than seek divorce or seek separation or to walk out of their families. For many survivors that come to Saheli, it is a last resort. And for many survivors, it is something that has been kind of taken out of their hands because of neighbors complained and a police involvement or DCF complained. Even then they still question, or they still have that shame of going through this whole thing, of having to see their sense of shame of having to see their husband being dragged through the courts, or being in jail, or being deported. So there's that expectation that they will retain the family at any cost, and there's a lot of shame and stigma attached to divorce. It is changing in the society, with women, as more and more women are becoming financially independent and more educated, but it is still pretty much stigmatized. Any questions on norms? There are so many other things we can speak of. Of course, at Saheli, we come from the culture. We help women from the culture, and this is something we can speak ad nauseum for hours at end. But these are some of just the prevailing cultural norms that impact a woman's ability to seek for help-seeking behaviors in case of domestic violence. Malcolm, I see that you had raised a hand. You have, please go ahead and ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I wondered how shame was conceived of and defined. If there's any kind of common definition, there are so many, but how is shame conceived of and defined?
Thank you for the question. So shame, when we talk about shame, we're talking about how the woman will be perceived in society, the shame she will carry. So it impacts the reason divorce is stigmatized is and I can speak for Indian families and Indian culture because I come from India. Is that it impacts their ability to send their kids to school, or to get their daughter married in a good family, or to get their son married in a good family. It impacts their ability to go out and seek work, live independently. So the shame becomes, she has left her family. She's not, the inclusion in social traditions, in family traditions, in marriages. Those are the things that a woman can be directly impacted when she experiences shame, and when she's shamed by her actions. Like you said, there may be multiple definitions of shame, but here we are talking about shame as it is experienced by these women, and how they feel when they're taking their actions, because they know they will experience that shame from the community and from the society.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, of course, there's more to go. I I'll pose another question, but you don't have to respond to it since you responded to one. How is resilience conceived of? Is resilience considered something valuable to counter shame, or is shame honored no matter what?
You know, that's it's a very thoughtful question, Mark, because there are some traits, you know, and we can get into a discussion, but there are some traits that are very individualistic, right? I mean, in Western societies, there are certain traits that are prized, and they're individualistic, you know, resiliency, you know, self-competence, you know, independence. Those are some of the traits that are individualistic in nature, you know, in a collectivistic notion of society or families, traits, you know, like compromise, you know, adjustment, you know, respect for elders, you know, speaking when you're spoken to, you know, things like that get, you know, are prized, right? So what happens, and you raise a very good point, when you are, you know, when you are breaking those ties, you know, to that culture and walking out, and when now you have to live your life and make a path for yourself, then what are some of the traits then that become important? Now resiliency, of course, you know, and the survivors are resilient. They have that, you know, they have that trait of independence and self competency and you know, finding their own path. Just that they need a little bit of helping hand and understanding to get there. So for example, resiliency in terms of adversity, in face of adversity, is a highly, it is valued, but it is valued within the family structure. So for, you know, when if a family is going through crisis and the whole family unit stays intact and they deal with the crisis as a family unit, it's a resilient family. Those are resilient family members, right? So there's a little bit of that difference, a nuance between the traits that are, you know, prized in a collectivistic concept of society and the individualistic aspects.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. So I'll just speak briefly, and then I will invite Rita to talk about you know, our services and what do we do at Saheli. You know, just touch on some of the issues that make a South Asian immigrant or an Arab immigrant woman, you know, vulnerable to domestic violence. There is the, you know, so you know, one of the things that are, you know, survivors from this region, the experience is the multiple perpetrators of violence. So it is not just intimate partner violence, it is there are multiple perpetrators, and those multiple perpetrators include family members that are direct, like, you know, your in-laws, but also extended families, you know, uncles and aunts, you know, your sister-in-laws, your brother-in-laws. So the extended family can also be perpetrators of violence. So on one hand, the protective factor of the extended family in the US as an immigrant is that they provide that support to you, but on the other hand, you know, you can also experience abuse at their hands. We already talked about the cultural norms, you know, some of the cultural norms that impact, you know, that make a South Asian woman vulnerable to domestic violence. You know, but the immigrant status plays a direct role in many survivors, you know, many women who experience domestic violence. You know, language is a big, you know, big factor. Lack of language means that they're not able to assimilate or find their, you know, way or you know, maneuver the systems. In the US, they become economically dependent on their husbands. They're not able to get jobs or education, which makes them vulnerable. You know, they get more isolated because of lack of language. They only meet you know, their extended family members or even meet few members of the community. So it makes them isolated. You know, there is the acculturation stress that they, you know, that they go through, and there is a limited support structure for them in the US, which makes them vulnerable. They are, you know, they, so survivors also bring, that fear of immigration issues, fear of being deported if they go to the authorities. They bring the fear of going to the police because they may carry, bad experiences of going to the authorities in their home countries. So that hinders them from help-seeking behaviors when they are, undergoing domestic violence. They are not aware, many of our survivors, in fact, many members of the community are not aware of the available resources or how to access them. And as immigrants, as people of color, they do experience racial prejudice, religious prejudice when they do seek out behavior that also makes them less likely to seek help. And this is where Saheli as a culturally specific organization brings its, we bring our commitment, our knowledge, our expertise, and our language skills to the community so we can be that resource for them. Interestingly, and this is, I forgot to mention this in the initially, Saheli means friend in Hindi. So when, Saheli was being started, the name was chosen because these women were isolated. They had left their family back home. They did not have a support structure. So Saheli became a friend kind of, who would, help them through difficult times in the US. So these are just some of the factors that make South Asian and Arab women vulnerable to domestic violence. There are so many more reasons, we can talk about, of course, but these are just some of the main ones that I wanted to touch upon. And I would welcome any questions, but we can move on and talk about Saheli's work, which I invite Rita to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya. If you can just continue doing the slides, I'll just tell you next whenever, so that'd be wonderful. This is wonderful. Divya covered quite a bit about our culture. Now, as you know, Saheli has been around for 24 years. Our first thing is we are able to do the domestic violence counseling in their own language. And between all of our volunteers, staff, and members, we have about 8 to 9 different languages, the major languages that we can do our counseling in. So that is wonderful. We have a legal advocacy. We have immigration lawyers as well as the family lawyer available every 2 weeks, where they can get a free half an hour or 40 minutes counseling, free, like they can talk about their stories and ask what are the different options. So this is available for anybody who is interested in getting some counseling, legal counseling from our lawyers. We have a support group. We have a different support group. One, we have an Arabic support group where they speak in Arabic language, as well as we have a regular support group where they do talk in English. So and that is run by our psychologist and our Arabic social worker. So anybody who might need those services, please refer them to us. We are launching our housing program that is going to be this month, where we're going to be supporting our survivors with housing and going to be able to help them with short-term housing, with the rental assistance of up to 6 months. And we do help them with the flexible funds, with the utilities, storage, and any other need that they have a one-time need of $500. So this is something very important to us, because one thing we hear from our survivors is housing is a big thing. Like, there is no space in shelter. If I come out of this abusive situation, what should I do? Where should I go? So in the old days, we were used to place them into small shelter homes, or it was easier to find shelters. Nowadays, it is harder to get a shelter home. So we have a contract with some of the hotels, and we have 2 to 4 weeks of hotels that we can provide them with no cost to the survivors. So this is one of the big programs we are launching this year. Next. So other few programmings we do is we have a free text clinic that about 30 survivors every year take advantage of it. We have a weekly ESL classes. We have Know Your Rights classes. We have a youth program and youth interns who join our program and they do their internship. And we, because one of the things we hear from survivors and survivors, teenage kids, is how to balance between two culture and what to do and what not to do. So we try to support these youth by running these youth programs for the survivors' kids. We have prevention seminars just like these. We reach out to the community. We have yoga classes, very popular with our survivors. About 15 to 20 survivors participate in these weekly yoga classes. And I already talked about legal clinics. We have financial literacy classes. That's another very popular class that Divya runs to help them budget their money, how to help them understand the money, how to help them understand the credit score so they can grow their credit score and be able to be independently, financially independent. We have every month, we have a different agencies come and talk about programs like medical assistance program or the home health aid program or beauty program or any program that would help them become self-sufficient with the 6 months or 3 months course. Because our goal is to have them come out of an abusive relationship, get them so they can make their own money and be able to be independent in a short time. So that is something that we are working on. And in last 24, this is our 25th year, we have helped more than 5,000 women and families. So this is a wonderful work that Saheli does across the Massachusetts. We are the only agencies that does the linguistic as well as culturally specific work in the Massachusetts. Next. And yeah, so this is our helpline number, 1-866-472-4354. We check that 3 times a day, and you can reach out to us through our website, Saheli Boston. You can write us an email at info@saheliboston.org. And if you have any question at all that me and Divya can answer, Divya, do you want to stop sharing so we can see everybody? Thank you, everybody. And let's, so we can see all of you. And if you have any questions that we can answer about Saheli, Saheli's work, Saheli's services. One thing I really want to thank each and every one of you, because about 5 to 10% of our survivors comes through all of you community members. We have a lot of survivors whose neighbors see them getting into violence, and they are the one who gives them Saheli's name, and they are the one who helps them make a phone call from their homes, and then survivors are able to reach out and be able to get services. I really do want to thank all of you in advance for helping the South Asian survivors who might not have access to the phone, might not have access to the resources, where all of you can play a role to get them be safe and be secure for themselves and their kids. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Mailing.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I actually have 2 questions. One is, I was wondering how common it is for the South Asian survivors to engage with the criminal justice system, and particularly to apply for restraining orders. And my second question is, how has the pandemic really changed their experiences and their ability to seek help?
Wonderful questions. Thank you, Mailing. I think the one thing is the pandemic has really created more stress where the two, where survivors does not have a quiet time or alone time, because before they could go out and when husband goes to work, they could make a phone call, get services. Now they are not able to do that. So that's something we have seen a lot more survivors who have to go out for a walk and be able to make a phone call to get some services. So that is really, really hard. It is getting harder for them. We are hoping as soon as this pandemic is over that they are able to get some services. And your first question, Divya, you want to take the first one?
So, as the so in the, there is a reluctance to engage with the criminal justice system, for sure. And that stems from experiences with law enforcement from the home countries many times, and from the fact that, dragging your family through the police or the courts, brings, censure and shame, from your family. We have seen that women have, they have been forced to take restraining order because of external complaints, or because, DCF, or for whichever reason, and they have, been forced to retract it because I talked about the extended family, have got involved. They've tried to, have had reconciliation or things like that. So there is a reluctance to engage, with criminal justice system, which is where, and there is that fear in our survivors to actually, go for, even when they have to go for hearings. And it for us, what we provide is the understanding and the support they need to navigate that effectively. Be it going with them to the court, even if you have to just stay there with them, we do that. With the pandemic, it was even more nerve-wracking because now they were either doing it on Zoom or the phone, and they wanted the advocates with them, and it was very hard for Saheli's DV advocates to be, to support them. But we did it in any way which we can. If it meant that they had to call us on another phone and we were just, on the phone with them while they were, talking to them before or after, providing them the language help. So we do. There's a lot of, a lot of onus on us for support for these survivors, and we find every which way that we can to support the survivors, through the criminal justice system. Any other questions?
Yes. Is the shame different for the abuser?
So, that's such an interesting question. And that is what I meant, when we ourselves fall into the trap of, talking about our survivors, this is what happens. And we are looking at, our lens becomes kind of focused on their experience. No, shame, there is shame in having your family matters be discussed in public, because all effort is to keep family affairs private. There is primacy of keeping your family affairs within the family and not taking it outside in the society. There is shame attached to, for the abuser to have gone to the court, or being arrested from his place of work or from home, or being taken by the police in front of the neighbors. There is not only shame, there is that sense of grievance that male abusers experience, and family of the male abusers experience, that my son was made to go through all of this, or that I had to go, as a male, as an abuser, I had to be shamed into going through this, and it sets them up in many cases. And this is not just for South Asian, it is true for many other survivors as well. There's that revenge factor that begins to play in, and we deal with, and it leads to that, to fear, to marked fear in the survivors, because it's one thing to deal with the intimate partner, but then it becomes another when the whole family, not only in the US, but back home, is pressurizing you, and the family itself is at risk. We have survivors, some high-risk cases, and cases where the girl's family is threatened by the abuser's family back, in their home country. So there is shame, but it is that shame is used, more as it can transcend I don't know. I mean, I'm finding the words hard, but they use the shame to in turn to shame the girl's family and the woman herself. I'm sorry, I have to say, we use the word girl, woman, survivor, and she kind of interchangeably. Most of the survivors that come to Saheli are women, but that does not mean that 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 men are not experiencing domestic violence, and we have helped, male survivors in the past. I hope that answered your question. And hi, Julie.
Hi. Oh, but were you about to, Divya, were you about to say something else?
No.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there are stereotypes or assumptions that people who are not from South Asia make or have about people who are from South Asia that makes it harder for South Asian survivors to get help, to find support, to be believed. I'm sort of just wondering about the stereotypes and the assumptions and things like that, and how that connects with survivor experiences here.
So, I mean, there is that immigrant, there are stereotypes, and then that is why I believe that understanding a person's unique experiences is important. There are stereotypes, the immigrant stereotypes, if an immigrant survivor, if an immigrant speaks limited English, there's a you kind of build up that, because they're not speaking English, they're not as educated or they're not as skilled. We struggle with a couple of stereotypes. One stereotype, especially for Indian immigrants, the Indian immigrants who come to the US, who came in the first wave were usually, who came here for education and for high-skilled jobs. So it's set up, they access the resources of this country, got good educations, good jobs, and it set up that model minority myth, where the Indians are considered the model minority. They're law-abiding, they follow the rules, they assimilate well, they often speak the language, and it creates, so within that community, it creates a dissonance in the sense that within the model minority myth, as an immigrant, it makes it harder for me to step out and say, okay, I'm not a model, this is what I'm experiencing, or I don't have the financial resources, or I have to go to a shelter, or I have to work this job, right? And that kind of, it hampers a more, maybe a person, more affluent person, to seek help because they don't want to lose that status, that privilege, that they have currently. On the other hand, for many limited English language speakers coming from South Asia and other cultures, there is that prejudice that they experience from the community, where they don't speak the language, or they're coming here seeking resources. They're not contributing to the economy and to the society, so they do experience that, that prejudice, which kind of impacts, when they want to go out and seek help. There are other, especially we see, we see with our survivors, some of our Muslim survivors, when we interact with law enforcement or with other agencies, we see a difference in behavior or treatment towards survivors that come from a particular region. Some of our Muslim survivors, or if the last name is such, we see a difference in behavior of agencies that we interact with. So we see that that stereotype that plays sometimes in people's attitude towards immigrants. And the rhetoric of immigrants has become even more charged in the last few years, and it has had an impact on the community and the survivors themselves. Any other questions?
Mei-Ling, go ahead.
It's a sort of general question, but do you find that the women are able to find support with female friends, or is it more the case that because of the sort of internalized conceptions about South Asian women and the patriarchal expectations that they're actually blamed for inviting the abuse? Because I do research in the Black community, and that's what I found.
And I think that is true. I think, I mean, they do confide into their friends and they do reach out and do talk to them. But when the abuse really gets very bad, then they are able to like, they do feel like they do need to get outside services and get some services to make sure they are safe and the children are safe. But yes, and the way you can add on. Yeah.
No, I agree with Rita. I mean, and you're completely right, you know, that it is, and we've had survivors say that once they actually took this action and they, you know, are living independently, that they have lost their friends in the community. So there is that, you know, it is hard for them to reach out to the community. So, and that is, you know, I always talk about the protective factors and, you know, of the community, when the community can be a great support. And, you know, with Saheli's work, the community really supports Saheli's work and support other members in distress. But it can also play that, you know, that role of you know, when the survivor wants to disclose or seek help, that they're not able to do so within their own community.
Go ahead, Sue.
I was just interested to know the centers of worship, the mosques or the temples or whatever. Are they a resource? Or I realize you can't generalize, but can they be a resource for survivors, or are they more likely to be of a more traditional point of view?
So from the temples, we do get a lot of referrals and we are able to help those survivors quite a bit with all the resources from legal to shelter to any of their needs. One thing about mosque is mosque does have their built-in resources where the imam is the one who plays the therapist between the families and try to work it out between the families, because most of the time the families really would like to stay together if it is possibility, if there is not a serious physical abuse or the survivor's life is not in danger, then the imam at the mosque, the priest would try to play a therapist role and try to have them write down the contract, how to make sure that they follow the moral values of the household and all that. So we have heard that from survivor, that I've gone through all of these things and still things are not working out. So that's the reason I'm reaching out to Saheli, because these things did not work. So we have seen those from our survivors that the temples and the mosque are helping. What we are doing is we are trying to build a relationship with mosque. We have been able to do it with temples, but mosque, they feel like in the old days, now when they know we are partners. In the old days, they felt like we were out there to break the families. So we had building that relationship, but now they do know that we do understand and we are open to counseling for the families and in-laws counseling and whatever is needed to keep the families together if there is a chance. But if there is no chance of keeping families together, then they should have right to go on their own ways. So we have been trying to able to have that relationship with Imam. Slowly, we are building it. But the one mosque in your area, Sudbury-Wayland Mosque, is the most open-minded mosque. And I had a really great relationship with them. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been very supportive, I would say. They, in fact, took part in our Purple Light Domestic Violence Awareness Month this last October.
Yep.
And elected to be illuminated at the same time as the local Jewish temple across the road. So quite a touching combination.
Yes.
We do see, I mean, places of worship and, priests, they do put primacy on, like for example, for Hindu in the temples, there is that, talked about obligations of, your duties and obligations towards the families. So there is a primacy and focus on those aspects, which makes it harder for someone to get that kind of help, domestic violence services help, from the temples. While they do help us with, with in-kind and financial resources, they're less likely to help a survivor, walk away from an abuse or, take action. And same with mosque, they are, Rita said that Imam is the family mediator. In many cases, the couple goes to the Imam. That's what, we know before they seek any other help. But they have, we've been fortunate with many of our survivors when they actually do need help, from something as simple as a praying mat to food and resources, that they have stepped up and helped us.
Can I just ask a second quick question? There seems to be a change in the winds in India, at least, around sexual assault. There seems to be a shift in the sort of general view of what's tolerable and what isn't. Do you detect any similar shifts in that in relationship to sexual assault, domestic violence? Is there any kind of groundswell of resistance in the statement that this is not acceptable?
So there is, there have been horrific, gang rapes and sexual assault cases that have happened in India and Pakistan in the last, I think, 3-4 months, that led to like mass demonstrations, movement by the people to change the laws. There are some restrictive laws in place in India against sexual assault, but how they are implemented, varies, in different places. One thing we have seen, and Rita can, talk more, that for many of the survivors, they may not be aware, like talking about there's no, they don't know what marital rape is. They don't know that they can be raped within a marriage, or talking about sexual assault. Many times it takes, quite a few conversations before a DV advocate may even find out, through conversation, that what the survivor is talking about is actual sexual assault. While the survivor, and that's part of our education work with the survivors, our support group, kind of making them aware of abuse and what constitutes abuse and what they have gone through. So we see more, and you're right, we see a little bit more openness to talking about these issues from younger survivors, maybe with less years of marriage, or survivors, who have had horrific experiences. But we, like in the US, women and girls are less likely to come out and speak if it is like on campus or within the family, not just, in the marriage, but within views within the family and things like that. Rita, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, so I agree with Divya. I think the one thing is that survivors sometimes, because my mother, they have seen the violence in their families. Either the abuser have seen the violence. Like my father had hit my mother, and it's common. Why is a big deal when I'm hitting you? When I'm hitting children. So I think depending upon how they are coming out of it, from what part of India and what part of family background, that they accept that this is, but then we do educate them. And sometimes these things do change when the abuser realize in this country, hitting the wife or children is not allowed. Sometimes they do get a message and they stop doing it, and they do get, so we have seen, but very rarely, we have seen those kind of change in behavior. But that does happen when they do understand that things are different in this country. This is not accepted. So because many of them are educated, many of them do understand that this country does have a different laws than the countries in India. Same thing, survivors, we do try to explain to them the resources available, as well as how, if they do help the criminal systems, we can help them get their own U visa or get the work permit and all that. Many of our survivors are on dependent visa, so they don't know how, what to do, because not only they have to go back to their home country, but many of their extended family, the parental family, might be upon them to be a US citizen and all that. And if they do end up going back to India, and the husband losing a job if he was on H1, then whole family is going to blame her, saying because of you everything happened, he had a criminal charges and all that. So I think a lot of shame, a lot of guilt is gonna, the survivor would be carrying if that does happen. But we do help them understand that we can help them with the immigration legal help. So if their life is in danger, do not have to live in this environment. So that does build up their strength, and then they are able to come out of the abusive relationship. Any other questions? Malcolm?
I wondered how Isabel Wilkerson's notions, her explorations of and interpretations of caste, how that's being received. I would not imagine well, but on the other hand, it might be opening some new doors for new points of view. What are the reactions coming?
So you're talking about caste system in India. Is that what you're talking about?
India, but also that's how she interprets racism, as the conception of caste applied to the way your body looks. And she sees it as a fundamental challenge in human cognition. And I haven't gotten to the solutions yet. I'm only 100 pages into it, but I wondered how it was being received, if at all.
I'm sorry, Malcolm, could you repeat the name of the author?
Isabel Wilkerson. You can get the essence of it on YouTube and a GBH interview, 6 minutes. And then she has a TED talk as well.
So I think the racism, similar to US, I think racism is seen across the India from our experience. The lighter skin is always better than darker skin. The northern people have lighter skin. The southern people have darker skin. And even if you are the most educated, like if the woman has a PhD and she has the best of the education and degree, but if she has a darker skin, she will have a hard time finding a life partner and getting somebody to marry her than somebody who has a lighter skin and if she is not even educated. So those things are still playing a role in India as part of the racism into the skin preference and how it is affecting to the whole all the families.
Thank you.
Just to add to Rita's point, so we were, some of the racism comes from being colonized, from our colonial history. The caste system, which is really complex, very, and it intersects with everything in India, so especially for Hindus, you're born into a certain caste, regardless of whether, you're rich, poor, or whichever region, how caste interact with other caste, the hierarchy that it places, all of those are still pretty much prevalent in India, and they determine, your experience life, much like, we talk about, people of color not having access to resources or, experiencing even COVID, right, has laid bare, people of color are experiencing COVID differently than other people. It's the same in India. It's the caste system imposes that kind of hierarchy where the experiences are different for different people at different levels. Unfortunately, it is still very much prevalent, and it is prevalent. And when immigrants come to the US, they also bring the conceptions of the caste system over here, where they, so it adds, there's that complexity, that intersectionality, as we say, that of caste, of language, of religion, that plays into experience of prejudice and racism in India and over here. But I look forward to reading the book, Malcolm. If you can put the name in the chat, I'd appreciate it.
It's encouraging. She's opening things up, I think.
Wonderful. So I just want to be aware of time. So I have put down my email and Divya's email into the chat box. Any of you can reach out to us, because I know Lauren might have a couple of other, all of you might have a couple of other things that you want to talk about before the meeting ends. So please reach out to us with any of the questions you might have. And we'll be happy to answer that. But please, thank you for being Saheli ambassadors. out in the community, and anybody who needs help, 100% free and confidential services, please have them connect with us. We'll be happy to help any of our survivors.
Thank you so much for having us here. We really appreciated the opportunity to talk about our work, our culture, a little bit about ourselves. And like Rita said, any questions you have, anything you want to clarify, question pops in your mind, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I just like, on behalf of the roundtable, I'd just like to thank you both so much. It's been a fascinating afternoon. And I hope our two organizations can stay connected. And because obviously we have a South Asian population out here in the suburbs. And it would be great if we could just learn more from you and draw upon your resources and strengths and as you can from ours. So thank you so much. And it was a very, very interesting session. I deeply appreciate it. And thank you, Sue. Sue, you want to say something?
How will people be able to access the recording if they want to watch it again? Or
Lauren?
I'm not sure what the roundtable usually does with that. I know we've recorded things and shared them in the past, so I actually don't have that information, but whatever we've done in the past, I assume.
We will talk about that. We can certainly send something out where people can access the recording for sure.
Wonderful. And we'll share that information on our social media channels, probably in our newsletter, as well as on our website. So keep in touch with us to find out.
Certainly.
Thank you all.
I'm just going to pop something up on the screen now. Lauren suggested I just put up this little flyer for you all. This is, you can see there the list of things we require for the Valentine's Day gift collection. And to give you some idea of the kinds of things that are being collected and also where they're going, the baskets in Sudbury Wine and Spirit.